as we try to understand and embrace the interpretive perspective of the biblical authors, what we're trying to do is read the Bible sympathetically. So we want to read the Bible from the perspective of the psalmists or the prophet or the evangelist or whoever who wrote the passage. As an example, what might be the most gruesome and shocking passage in the whole Bible, Psalm 137, verses 8 and 9, where the psalmist blesses the one who is going to seize the children of the Babylonians and dash them against the rocks. This is pretty brutal. But if you read it sympathetically, now a lot of people haven't read it sympathetically. They will say things like, there's no way a Christian can appropriate that attitude. There's no place for it in Christianity. And then they'll refer to things like Jesus saying, turn the other cheek. But if you read it sympathetically, and if you do your exegetical homework, you'll see that the word for dash there, the one who dashes their children against the rocks, is only used 2 times in the whole Psalter. The other place it's used is in Psalm 2, which speaks of the king from David's line who's going to rule the nations with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. So that's a very important word, and it seems to suggest that the blessed one in Psalm 137 is the future king from David's line. And then if you say, well, what about the children here? And don't we have a problem with this vindictive spirit from the psalmist? Well, if you reflect on this in light of the whole Bible, a passage that comes to mind is Exodus 34, 6 and 7, where the Lord told Moses that he was going to visit the sins of the fathers on the children. So the psalmist is simply applying what God has said to Moses about himself and to David about the future king from his line in Psalm 2. And then if we go further back still, we eventually get to Genesis 3:15, where the seed of the woman is going to bruise the head of the seed of the serpent. And who are the children of the Babylonians but the seed of the serpent? So this passage that initially strikes us as harsh and vindictive and appalling, really, if we read it from the perspective of the one who wrote it, we come to see that it's a passage that's based on God's revelation of who he is and God's promise, really, that he's going to defeat evil and those who would perpetuate evil. So there are scholars who say things like, we don't want our children to embrace all the perspectives that are articulated in the Psalter. To which I say, well, if you want your children to be against evil, if you want your children to be against ongoing oppression, you ought to want them to understand and embrace the interpretive perspective of the biblical authors, which is to say, we want to do biblical theology and understand the Bible in light of the whole story of Scripture.